Anyone that's got industrial assets needs to figure out how do they begin securing, protecting, and managing those industrial assets in a safe, secure manner.
Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Craig Duckworth.
And I'm Dino Busalaki.
And so what have you been doing lately, Dino? Because I haven't seen you, it seems like forever.
The new year started and, budgets have opened up and clients are coming at us with all kinds of requirements in regards to helping with my cybersecurity and my manufacturing facilities.
I'm the same way. My head's been swimming after the first of the year, and it's trying to get my feet back underneath me and get moving started with some of the new initiatives we've got going. What's on your mind today? What are you thinking?
There's a lot of things on my mind, but one of the things I think we could talk about is one of the shifts we're starting to see in regards to managed services in regards to cybersecurity, specifically around some of the OT IDS software companies that have built service programs out of necessity in order to service their clients who were taking their tech. And because of there wasn't a lot of resources, experience, and skills out there, and this stuff is fairly new, even though it's been around for a decade now, some of these firms, is them wanting to move away from that, stick to being software companies and trying to find service organizations that can take on the responsibility of managing and maintaining these OT IDS platforms for manufacturers and in assistance with the clients.
Well, and I look at that, and we've seen this. We've talked about this in the past. Organizations, resellers were signing up to resell these software companies. They were backing up to the door of a manufacturing site. They were dumping it off, washing their hands and saying, have a great day, see you later. And they're turning into shelfware. Organizations are now, the software manufacturers are starting to see let's call it churn, the lack of recurring with renewal rates. And they're trying to figure out that model of how do we ensure that there's what we call local adoption, localization, operationalizing this technology so that the client gets value out of the technology.
Well, value in help, right? I mean, I think the pressures are still mounting in regards to risk, regulations, the board, the geopolitical environment they're up against out there. And with AI, coming at them like a freight train, how are we going to deal with this, right? How am I going to find the people? How am I going to build these practices? How am I going to provide, measurable services that are showing not only that it's, helping me with my operational efficiencies, but also protecting my manufacturing and operations.
Right. No, totally get it.
And then being able to, determine how well IT can assist in that, right? And you always hear me, IT has a role, right? On the field, in the huddle, just can't really be the quarterback in owning this, because at the end of the day, they don't own the assets on the plant floor, because the responsibilities and priorities are much different in that space. So, if you talk about pen testing, right? We hear a lot about pen testing, the red teams. How do I create an offensive situation without being disruptive to my plant floor, right? And so does that mean that you're going to, build digital twins? Very expensive. You can't really do this type of work in a manufacturing environment that's running without being disruptive. And you can't, we've witnessed what a pen test can do to a manufacturing facility when you're running it in the middle of the day, running full out, right? And so you have to take a different tactic, which is, well, we'll do it while the plant is down. What good is that, right? All the systems are offline or not powered up, and your pen test then, to me, is just a waste of time.
Yeah, well, and in the OT environment, it's more about what does that lateral movement look like? What is the opportunity once someone is in that environment? What can they access? What can they get to? What can they do when they're there? It's not, because if you look at it holistically, most of the OT side is kind of protected a little bit below the IT firewalls, if you want to call it that. There's still paths down there, but they've got some insulation to them. So it's a matter of how do they maneuver when they get there is the concern, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's back to the controller, right? I mean, we still see a lot of clients got stuff that's 20, 30 plus years old. They're still using older network infrastructure technologies like DeviceNet, ControlNet, Profibus, et cetera. And there's not a lot of organizations that could even deal with that. Even the companies, the Rockwells and the Siemens of the world, their resources of dealing with this ancient technology, they don't even have the skill sets anymore. Their recommendation when you have that stuff is to get it out and replace it, right? And anything coming in new is smarter, it's more complex, it's more connected, and using more of an enterprise approach from a network component specifically. I've been working with a beverage company over the last couple of weeks, and their plant network is still a very large layer 2 flat network, meaning that when somebody remotes in from the outside, they got access to everything. There's no way to control where they're going, what they're doing while they're in there, right? They provide a pipe for them, let them in, off they go. And that still exists today, right? Pretty prevalent. And those are areas where IT is just, to them, it's like a fish out of water, for them.
Well, it goes back to the underlying fundamentals. IT does not own nor support those assets, and they struggle with a lot of the functionality around them because of that.
Let's be honest. Some of those assets are older than the resources they've hired to be their cybersecurity professional.
Well, there is that.
So it's a challenge. I mean, it really, really is. And to the point, getting back to why these cybersecurity technology companies are starting to look for partners that are more plant floor focused. For example, that, who can actually patch my control systems, right? Either the client can do it, they can't, because most of them don't have controls engineers. They hire that out, right? And so they're either relying on the OEM or the system integrator. And then the question is, even any of those guys still in business, because you've had that equipment out there for, 2 decades or whatever. And so now you got to find organizations that actually can do that work, who actually can work with their tools, i.e. these cybersecurity platforms, have a practice in place and can put together a program for a client to go and execute patching just of their control systems.
Well, patching is a big topic these days. As you look at how do I effectively and safely patch within the OT environment, whether that's a Windows patch running a HMI, whether that is whatever it might be, what's the method that I do that? And then you have to look at all of the ancillary devices associated with what you're looking to patch, and is it compatible with the version that you're going to? So there's a lot of, it's not as easy and clean as it is on the IT side, where somebody hits a button and it just sends it out to everything.
And when you think of the supply chain, it's you have this, the materials, for example, from a supply chain perspective, that you could be doing the best job in the world of securing and protecting your plant, but the organizations that are providing you raw materials or other goods and services, if they're not doing something and they have disruption, that domino effect is going to impact you, which gets me back to, one of the themes that have been through several of our podcasts is how do you get those IT leadership folks involved with the key suppliers in these plants to determine their strengths and weaknesses around cybersecurity, their partnerships, their practices, their capabilities, to be able to assist that IT organization with driving a cybersecurity strategy within their company.
Well, you look at the supply chain and you really are only as strong as the weakest link in that chain. And it reminds me of kind of what the DOD and the federal government put together, I don't know, 10 plus years ago. They finally gave teeth to, which is the CMMC certification for anything supplying the entire supply chain within the manufacturer of the DOD. They basically just stopped allowing the primes to provide any contracts down if they weren't certified. They didn't have another way to fix it.
Yeah. Well, and even if they drive through and set up the governance and the policies, it doesn't mean that they're being applied, right? I was talking to a pharmaceutical company just this morning, and we started this conversation a year ago, and obviously our firm is doing work for companies like this, and we're still not seeing the targets that are being generated by the cybersecurity team being pushed down into the plant, down to the system integrators who are in there, designing and deploying, supporting, commissioning, and starting up these control systems. And that's part of the supply chain, in my view. That's another piece of the supply chain.
And it's unfortunate. Organizations spend a lot of time, energy, effort money to implement these policies, guidelines, and they expect it to make its way down to where it's important below that control layer. And then a lot of times the effort is not there and it takes a lot longer than it should. So it's very slow to react. It's like turning a battleship on the ocean versus a speedboat.
Yeah. Well, and even the consulting organizations, which is another part of that money that they've spent to get, a strategy and a report on what they should be doing, but you're not executing. Right. And that consulting company that you hired to tell you what you need to be doing aren't in a position to execute either. Otherwise, again, they would be dragging in these partners that are in there working in these plants all day, every day, finding out what their capabilities are and what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, they're good at governance, they're good at compliance, not so much from a delivery and let's call it boots on the ground and being that last mile in making sure that it's operational.
And the last mile is the hardest thing to get to in these plants. Without a doubt, it is, again, because of the life cycle, spanning decades and lack of documentation, the uncertainty of how that stuff is put together, how it works, what's communicating in that environment, what that infrastructure looks like, what can you even do with that aged out equipment and software and operating systems, and applications that they have in that environment. You got to think about the whole environment, right? You can't eat the elephant in one bite. But you should be able to get at least at a minimum start with an asset inventory to determine what your risk and vulnerabilities are and what you have in your house. And from there, you can start focusing on end of life, end of support assets, determine how to develop your capital plan to go after that stuff. Microsegmentation, back to my conversation with the beverage company that's got a very large flat layer 2 network, at the controls layer, putting in technologies that are actually monitoring what's going on in that space and reporting back, to the things that are the metrics that you should be concerned about. Treat it like it is a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? You got to start somewhere. And those companies that are cutting their budgets back in this space for whatever reason, to recognizing I don't have the people to be able to do this. I don't know who the partners that I should be working with. Back to the conversation of finding out who your system integrators are that are working in your plants to figure out what their capabilities are, and you got to get all the liars in the same room at some point in time. And, a lot of that includes the plant people and they're left out a lot of those conversations too, the local teams.
Well, it's a mind shift. It changes the narrative. You look at the OT ecosystem and the mind shift. The method down here has always been very reactive and break fix methods. So you change that from, what you mentioned a while ago is life cycle replacement in that space. These IDS that give you full asset inventory with make, model, serial, end of life, end of support. Now you can begin building that capital budget for next year or next quarter or whatever your time window looks like. And you can have a forward-looking mentality that says, okay, in fiscal year 28, we've got 175 PLCs that are, pick a brand, that are end of life, end of support that we need to consider replacing with something else, or at minimum, putting controls around how do we make sure that they are the most secure in our environment, because there is nothing else we can do besides monitor them at that point. And how do you begin putting a plan together to do that?
Yeah, well, and part of it, it's that coin-operated mindset of most of these organizations that want to just sell technology, right? And we recognize that sometimes these sales cycles can be long for this particular area of cybersecurity and industrial environment versus somebody who's just focused on a quarter, right? And they're only going to spend time and energy on the things that they can close in that quarter versus trying to farm and work and understand what needs to be done in order really to deploy a solution, in a consistent manner to get the depth and visibility of that last mile in order to really start rounding out your cybersecurity posture within these environments. And I think that's I don't want to be a hypocrite, obviously we're in the business to provide services and make money as a company. But at the same time, I don't look at it as I'm only concerned about this quarter and a quick hit sales cycles just so I can make the deal and move on. I know it's the long-term play in order to do this right.
Yeah, you're starting to be looked at as a strategic advisor and a partnership to that organization when you're looking at multiple years worth of value creation for that organization, not a quick sale and walk away. But again, it's changing that mindset and bringing more value to the organization.
Yeah. And the other thing we're starting to witness too, I know you mentioned just a few minutes ago talking about Shelfware. Well, now we have organizations that have had these tools out there for a number of years, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and they recognize that the first one they went with wasn't the best choice. All right. And so now they're recalibrating and thinking, well, now I need to go look at another tool. And then there are those that I think picked a really good tool, just didn't implement it or manage it properly, to waste time and energy going look at another tool, right? Which is not necessarily the best course of action either. So, generally speaking, is we're starting to see a shift of people changing from one to the other. We've seen the mergers and acquisitions, right? Here just recently, 2 big ones with Nozomi, just in the past few months, moving to a very large, really IT organization. Well, except for Mitsubishi with Nozomi, is more of an automation company versus ServiceNow, which is IT picking up this, right? Obviously, Dragos and Clarity are still out there independent, working. But we are starting to see flips in technologies because the company just wasn't seeing the value or the benefit of the tool that they bought.
Well, and you look at, that Clarity just took another $150 million in the last week, 10 days, whatever it was. So as these organizations continue to evolve, continue to refine their product, end users that felt they had the best technology 5 years ago, 6 years ago, based on architecture and whatever you want to look at, promises made by whoever, are realizing maybe there are better, more suited technologies available for what that end user is trying to solve for and what they need to do. And other newer technologies that are, let's call them smaller startups, are coming on scene that are starting to make a splash, a name for themselves, that are doing it different, leveraging that AI for some of those minimal tasks to help automate the process to be more efficient.
Yeah. Well, and the automation vendors, Rockwell, Siemens, Emerson, they provide services. Then they have the technology, they have at least the partnerships per se, are starting to drive and change that narrative as we're describing the fact that this OT ecosystem has to get better at this, right? The question is those large automation technology companies can't deal with everybody, all the clients. They're working with the Fortune 50s, maybe the Fortune 100s, but anything after that, you're on your own. And you may have Siemens or Rockwell in your plant, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're sitting there, because one, you probably couldn't afford them to come in and be your overall managed consulting, execution, deployment, managed services group, very expensive to bring them in. So now you have to start shifting your thinking about, well, who can I actually go and talk to about this? But they also have to be well suited to work in the manufacturing space versus somebody who's used to working in the back office.
And I would say, every manufacturing site that I've been in, I know that you have, there's no one automation vendor exclusively in that facility. There will be many that we run across, and it's going to be difficult to get an OEM, i.e. Rockwell or Siemens or Schneider, that is a manufacturing technology company, to go in and support all of the manufacturer make and models, not just their own, versus a systems integrator that is accustomed to working with a mix and myriad of everything that's there, no matter what it is, because the facility just says, make this stuff work.
Right, because they're agnostic, right? They were built that way to work with the various auto technologies out there for manufacturing.
Yeah, for sure. But again, it leads to a lot of other stuff that we see on the plant floor from I'm going to do whatever it takes to make my plant operate. Whether that's pulling in internet from an ISP, whether that is creating a shadow OT or IT network to put Chromebooks on a separate VLAN or a separate internet pull, whatever it takes to get the job done and skirt or avert or disregard some of the security policies that are in place because they're so restrictive.
Going back to the shadow IT, OT, I don't view OT as being a shadow IT group. I just don't, right? Because IT is not engaged at that control, SCADA, DCS, layer within these manufacturing plants. They're just not. I've been doing this for decades, and I haven't witnessed it yet. The closest IT gets is portions of the network, MES applications, VMs, some firewalls. That's the EDR, is the gist of what they're really trying to drive. And even on the EDR front, we don't even put EDR in the HMIs that we design and build for the clients, because we know that managing and administering that technology within that control system environment can be very disruptive, right, to the operations. We just see it after the fact where IT, talking about shadow, where IT is becoming the shadow group, in my opinion, to that, right?
There is, in my opinion, if you look at the EDR, what's the true R down in the OT space? There's not a remediate. There's a maybe respond. I don't know, but it's minimal, because really, what does that mean when you're dealing with controls?
Right. Well, it's if you have an event, your first responder is who?
It's a controls engineer.
The operators. That's right. It's the operators. It's somebody needs to get that equipment to a safe state, get product into a safe place, to keep from losing product, damaging equipment, environmental, disbursements.
Physical eyes on the operations. What is taking place? Was this a change that needed based off of temperature, time, speed, something that they're trying to correct, fix, or something is just really awry?
Right. So, so the COOs, executives in the engineering ranks, the manufacturing operations teams, you really got to step up your game, right? And not defer, right? Just assume that your IT organization's covering the bases. You really have to dig in and start figuring out how you can best survive from a cybersecurity perspective, an AI perspective, within your ecosystem of the technologies that you are procuring and implementing and using to make the goods and services that your manufacturers make.
Well, and for those that are out there that haven't done anything, that don't have a vulnerability management, visibility tool, or any of those in place, the time of doing nothing is gone. That was 2025. That ship has sailed, 45 days ago almost. It is time to get with the program and start evaluating, looking at, discovering, doing bake-off, reviewing the technology, and finding what works for you, and start making a change.
Right. And go to events and conferences that speak exclusively to this stuff, like
we got one coming up.
That's right. S4. It's in Miami in a couple of weeks, right? I mean, and this is not a new event. Dale Peterson's been doing this for 25 years or more. I think he's been running S4, and they got a good following. They got a lot of assets owners that show up. You got the consulting companies, you got the engineering and integrators that are at this event. You need to start finding events like S4 if you're a CIO or a CISO or an IT executive, instead of just going to RSA and Black Hat and whatever Cisco's doing, go to Rockwell Automation Fair, go to S4, go to Manusec, go to Hanover Messe, right? Go to these manufacturing conferences and events and see what the heck they're doing.
Anyone that's got industrial assets needs to figure out how do they begin securing, protecting, and managing those industrial assets in a safe, secure manner. And these conferences are going to give you the basis for where to start looking to make that decision.
Well, you can see what your peers are doing, your competitors are doing, your colleagues, what they're doing, so you're not looking at it through just one lens. You need to get multiple lenses, to and meet the folks that are being tasked with the same thing you may be being tasked with.
Right. No, totally agree. And this is for those that missed this year's S4 coming up in 2 weeks on Miami Beach. Next year it's going back to Tampa. So I think Dale found a little bit larger venue that's going to hold more people, so he can get more people involved from the industry. Again, it's a phenomenal opportunity for anyone in the industrial space to evaluate new technology. This is a cutting edge conference for industrial asset owners and technologies.
Yeah. You got to keep learning. You got to keep asking questions. You still got to keep gaining knowledge. You got to find out who are the shakers and movers in this space that you can work with. Your vendors will tell you, if you did hard enough, that if you're talking to Cisco or Clarity or, Armis, if you're profiling the type of partner you're looking for, Those folks can help you find those groups because, again, they're trying to get out of the services business, right? They don't want to be in that business. They want to be software tech companies. They don't want to be hardware guys. They don't want to be services organization. They want their partner community to pick that up.
Well, again, you look at organizations like Design Group and the versatility that we have across the automation industry and the various makes, models, manufacturers that we can work on, support, the tools that we have the ability to bring in and help manage from an operations. It's very vast, where if you are pick Clarity or pick Armis or pick Nozomi, whatever that is, then you're trying to train an entire team, and the number of people that you have to have is astronomical. At Design, we've got 1,600 pros, and there's a vast experience level across all of that industry. It's not just one. That's not an overnight gathering of talent.
That's right. And chances are pretty good, if you're in the food and bev industry, we're already working in your manufacturing plants, really likely. Same thing with life sciences, pharmaceuticals. You can go down the list of some of the big verticals that we operate in, but you need to find out who they are. Going back to that conversation from an IT perspective, who are they working with? Who can I talk to?
My message to that would be, don't go down the path alone. Talk to your systems integrator, talk to your ecosystem, talk to a peer that you feel is non-competitive in nature, and ask them, what are they doing? How are they addressing it? Board members across all verticals are having these conversations. They're expecting the C-level down to begin addressing this if they have not already started. It's coming. Find yourself a partner, somebody that you trust, that is in the space, that has a practice. Lean on them for guidance. If you want to build your own practice in the next 24, 36, 48 months, that's great. Leverage that trusted partner until you can stand on your own 2 feet and be confident and comfortable in what you're doing.
Yeah. And if your model's outsourcing on the IT side, probably should consider the same thing on your OT side when it comes to cybersecurity. So whatever reasons why you decided to outsource, a lot of your IT technologies and services and support, you need to think about the same thing on the OT side, because the OT side's already doing it when it comes to controls engineers. Most organizations do not have controls engineers. They don't. They got some mechanical people. They got some folks out there who can do break fix stuff. And their job is to fight fires most of the day and keep those plants running. They're not visionaries that are sitting there at the top of the trees looking across the horizon to trying to decide which direction to go.
Yeah, no, it's 100% correct. We're seeing in the news almost daily the number of attacks because they're either AI augmented, driven, supported, are continuing to go up. They're targeting manufacturing across the different verticals. It's not going away. This problem that we have is not going away. It's got to be addressed, and organizations have to start owning this. And there's no other way. You can't sugarcoat it anymore. It's time for the truth.
And from a manufacturing perspective, trying to find resources is difficult, right? A lot of folks are retiring out. You've got that silver tsunami, as I like calling it, or the peak 65. But we all know that for every 2 jobs that are leaving, maybe one's coming back, and this is where you need to make the plea, women, diversity, coming into think of manufacturing,
Anybody. Yeah, anybody. We can just clone you and make you work another 55 years. How's that sound?
Yeah, we got to have folks that want to work in this space, but you got to make it so that it's something they want to do. It's got to be attractive. It's got to be safe. It has to be fulfilling. There's a lot of other attributes to get folks to want to come into the manufacturing space. It's just, we got our work cut out for us on that front.
Yeah, we do. Great conversation, Dino. It's good to catch up with you as always. Feel free, you guys, if you're looking for help, you need some guidance, reach out to us. Follow us, send one of us an email, give us a phone call, whatever you need. We're here to help support you. Again, we're all in this together.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.